program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with the Eau Claire Area School Board. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to respectfully call this school board meeting to order. Thanks to the board, our staff, and all the others in attendance and those that are listening online. And thank you to the Chippewa Valley Community Television for allowing it to be online and for documenting it for us. And we do have cookies, and we don't have very many people here tonight, so you all will have lots of cookies. Right? Okay. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Patty, are we in compliance with the Wisconsin open meetings law notification?
Yes, we are.
Thank you very much. Would you roll call for a quorum, please?
Commissioner Duax? Here. Commissioner Hambuck-Boyle?
Here.
Commissioner Harder?
Here.
Commissioner Luganbill?
Here.
Commissioner Wu is absent. Commissioner Torres?
Here.
Commissioner Bika? Here.
Thanks, Patty. And I don't have the clipboard. Did we have anyone signed up tonight? I forgot to look because I was coming from the other room. So hang on, everyone. Nope, we don't have anyone for our public forum. That makes me sad. We also have public comment on the pupil non-discrimination self-evaluation. That will be put on the consent agenda tonight, and so it has been out in the public for any input. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the board relative to public comment on our pupil non-discrimination self-evaluation? It was rather a good read, I thought. Seeing none, then we will move on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you. So we'll have an upcoming Board of Education events review. Tomorrow, October 24th, there will be the WASB regional meeting. It begins at 4:30 with a pre-workshop, followed at 6:30 p.m. by dinner and their annual meeting there. October 25th at 5 p.m., you will have a budget hearing to adopt the budget, and there will also be a public hearing that evening about the budget. On October 31, there is a meeting of the Eau Claire Public Schools Foundation that will take place at noon at Whippley. And then on November 6th, there will be a meeting of the Policy and Governance Committee, followed by a school board meeting that evening, and those will take place in the administration building. So I wanted to say to the board that on behalf of the executive team, I want to thank you for your efforts at last week's board retreat. I think it was helpful to get your perspective on the budget and the challenges that lay ahead in terms of our meeting, our priorities. But we were all encouraged by the formation of a board committee to look into a governance model that will help us have a sustainable governance model. And I think we can build upon those discussions and the direction and the support that you provided. So thank you for that. I'm pleased to announce that the Eau Claire Area School District has been awarded an Education for Homeless Children and Youth Project Grant for the 2017-2020 grant cycle. And these funds are provided under the McKinney-Vento Homeless Education Assistance Act and complete the first year of the 3-year funding cycle. And for us, that means in the amount of $24,845, and that funding will be used to continue our current efforts for homeless students. Last Tuesday, October 17th, the school district participated in the Chamber of Commerce Business Expo and Job Fair at the Eau Claire Indoor Sports Center. Board members took turns manning the booth in the evening hours, and HR representatives manned the booth during the day in order to participate in the Chamber's job fair. And I want to thank Terry Piper Thompson for coordinating that activity. It was a good day to get out and be with the business community, and I heard many positive comments from the representatives who were there about having board members in attendance and manning the booth. And then as a reminder, Patty Iverson has made arrangements for you to have your official board photo taken on November 6th. So if you're not able to meet or to make that meeting, please let us know. And if everyone is available, I will just say to you, come camera ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hardebeck. Poor Patty's been planning a picture for months now, right, Patty? So hopefully this one will work. I'm going to do my president's report now, and I wanted to start by saying that we just lost one of our educators who taught at Little Red and Meadowview. Karen Brown passed away. She was 52 years old. It was amazing to see all the people and the reminiscence of colleagues, educators together, and administration. You grow close in this job and as a public servant, and that was very evident. So we will really miss Karen Brown and honor her service. Again, I want to thank all of those attending this week. The Regional Wisconsin Association of School Boards meeting is tomorrow evening, and we have a full board attending, and I think that is the first time since I've been on the board that we've had the full board attend. So way to go, board. Yay for you. I'm so proud of them. It's an important meeting too, because at 4:30, the 4:30 session, which most of us will be attending, will be on the impact of the state budget. So we usually get a huge PowerPoint defining all the work entailed in following up on the changes imposed on public schools through the state spending budget. So we will bring all that information back, and it'll be fun that we're all hearing it together. I, as president, I could have attended the National Association of School Boards Convention this year, but have decided not to. We have two other board members that could. That's you, Aaron, and Charles. So if you want to attend, connect with Charles and make sure Patty gets to know. I'm having a little trouble walking with the hip, and I just think it would be hard to do it, so I'm going to stay home. Also, I want to thank you as well. Mary Ann did, as far as our participation at our board retreat Thursday evening. Not just the board, but also having the exec team there was really beneficial for all of us. I think as we think of our district built on relationships, that's what we need to do as a board and as an exec team and superintendent as well. So that's tied into communications and our relationships. So it was good. We will go from here to work on completing our governance model, and we have a handbook going for board members now too that's being worked on as well. And thinking about possibly with this kind of work that needs to be done and finished, for the board to start thinking about going from one formal meeting and one work session a month as we get down the road here, so we can get this work done. So I just wanted to bring that up as well. So think about that. Mary Ann and I were talking today, and maybe January would be a good time to start it, start that model. So that concludes my president's report. Hi, Lauren and Ryan, how are you? You have reports for us tonight? Who's going first? Thanks, Ryan.
Good evening. I'd like to give out some recognition to 7 North student athletes as our fall sports season is wrapping up. The girls volleyball team soundly defeated Hudson on Saturday to win the regional title and advance to sectionals. For our cross-country team, David Ecker won the sectional title in Menominee this past Saturday. He will run the state meet next weekend in Wisconsin Rapids. For our girls golf team, 4 students have earned academic all-state honors, so good job to all of them. If any of you recall, I conducted a student survey last year where I asked a multitude of questions, some coming directly from board members. One of those questions included students having more say in their education. A large majority of students were in support of having a greater role in their schooling, so I'd like to have a discussion on a possible role for students in giving their say. This could include a question or two in the student engagement survey, or possibly having a student attend a meeting where the course catalog is made. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Lauren?
All right, as Ryan mentioned, it's been busy for sports in the last couple weeks. with girls golf, football, girls tennis, volleyball, and girls cross country finishing their seasons in the past few weeks. Boys soccer is continuing in playoffs, playing Hudson this Thursday, and I'm excited to announce that the Memorial Boys cross country team qualified as a team for state this Saturday in Wisconsin Rapids, so that's exciting. This would be the first time they've qualified in what I would consider my era of high school, so the last 4 years here. Girls swim and dive continues their long season with conference this weekend. As far as the arts are concerned, band had their first official concert last Monday, which was their indoor marching band concert, and that was fun as always. And then today, kind of an exciting opportunity for students who are in upper level foreign languages. They had the chance to take a little trip over to UWEC, and they just had the opportunity to learn about what it's like to continue taking a foreign language in college, as well as learn the benefits of doing so. They had the chance to talk with current students, sit in on a class, learn about study abroad opportunities, so that was an exciting opportunity for our students today. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Lauren and Ryan. That takes us on to our school board committee reports. I know we have policy and governance and budget development. Do we have any others? Who wants to go first? Aaron, take it away.
Well, we did meet the Budget Development Committee last Wednesday again, and the big topic is the coming budget, which needs approval by November 1st, and it's a topic of tonight's meeting as well as Wednesday when we have a school budget hearing from 5 to 6 p.m. So that's kind of the big news. We're going to be getting back onto OPEB and others when we resume for our next meeting. So.
Thanks, Aaron. Policy and governance, Commissioner Luganbill.
We met this morning and we looked at two policies. Our policy on flyer distribution, which we updated to match current practice, and we'll have that for you at a future meeting. We moved that one along. And then we also discussed policy 445 regarding school resource officers. That policy hasn't been updated in 17 years, so we're continuing our work on that. And on November 6th, our committee will go in depth about the principles guiding the policy. On November 9th, we've asked for a stakeholder group to be put together of HR from ECASD and the police department, city, police department representatives, executive team representatives, principals, to discuss the scope of SROs in our schools. And then on November 20th, we'll come back to looking at that full policy and looking at the work that those groups did for us. So should be a lot of good work.
Thank you, Commissioner Luganbill. And that concludes our committee reports. Commissioner Luganbill, do you have a legislative update?
I just have one. It's the cost. Today, DPI just released the new figures on the cost for Wisconsin's voucher programs. They will reach just under $270 million this school year, coming school year. So just something to keep in mind. The DPI put out a really interesting website with information today outlining this, what it means. This is much higher than expected, so just something to be aware of.
Commissioner Luganbill, can you send the DPI link out to the board?
Yeah, and I can get
Thank
it
you.
put on the district page
On
too.
the page too. Thank you. And that takes us to our consent resolution agenda. And I will pass this in full. If anyone wants to pull or has questions or would like additional information, you can pull the item. So I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of October 9th, 2017. The gifts in the amount of $6,815.09 for the period of September 1, 2017 through September 30th, 2017. Payment of all bills in the amount of $6,859,069.26. And net payroll in the amount of $5,489,125.06 for the period of September 1, 2017 through September 30th, 2017. Human Resources Employment Report. Revisions to Policy 432, Attendance Areas. Pupil Non-Discrimination Self-Evaluation.
I move approval of 7.2 through 7.7.
Commissioner Duax moved to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Harder. Patty, would you please take a roll call vote, please? Thank you.
Commissioner Harder,
Yes.
Commissioner Luganbill,
Yes.
Commissioner Torres,
Yes.
Commissioner Bika,
Yes.
Commissioner Duax,
Yes.
Commissioner Hambuck-Boyle.
Yes. That takes us to our individually considered resolutions. We have one item tonight. It's the approval of the recommended 2017-2018 budget. We have, I don't know if people know this, but there's a timeline that the budget is put on. It also coincides with the biennium budget for the state. So I find it interesting as you look at the content of this part of our individually considered resolutions is that we've already put a summary of the approved budget is published in the newspaper, along with the notice of the date, time, and place of the public hearing, which will be on Wednesday. Patty does all that. Thank you. And there must be at least 15 days between that publication and the hearing. So tonight we're just going to discuss it more and adopt the budget. So Abby, you're in charge.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
So we've been talking about budget for like the last 3 board meetings, and we spoke a lot about it last week at the board retreat. And so tonight, just a quick summary, and then if there's any questions, I will be able to answer them, and then we can move on. So just a friendly reminder, we have talked about this the last few times, but our revenue limit, again, is composed of property taxes and state aid. And you can see our 2017 actual, our property taxes were 50.98% of that amount and 49.02%. And you can see this year we're ending up at 51.97 and 48.03. So just a little bit different, but very close to that 50-50, and that's been pretty much the history here in Eau Claire. We've been very close to 50-50 funded for education in the city of Eau Claire. Again, we talked about revenue types in looking at Fund 10, which is our general fund. Our property tax, our levy is going to be down $1,748,000 for this year, and our equalized aid is up $450,000. So for Fund 10 revenue, we're down about $1.3 million. And we talked a lot last week at the board retreat and also at budget development that the property tax levy is down because we shifted that to make the debt payment that was related to the referendum. We had originally planned on $2.2 million moving over for that debt levy, and when we get to the tax levy, you'll see that it's impacting Fund 10 and Fund 38, which is our debt service fund. And the difference in Fund 10 is that the equalized aid went up, and so that's why we're not seeing that full 2.2 in Fund 10, and why we're seeing that 2.2 over in the Fund 38.
Abby, can I say something here quickly too, so that people in the audience know, or people that are listening online, is we had a retreat this past Thursday and spent a few hours on the budget. We also, as a board, have gone over the budget, and we also had the executive summary. So I just want people to know the work that's gone in ahead of time prior to this presentation tonight. So thanks. Go ahead, Ab.
You're welcome. Okay, so moving on, our per pupil aid, we spent a lot of time talking about that additional $200 per pupil and how that would affect Eau Claire. And so you can see it's impacting our budget by $2.2 million for this coming year. And that about offsets that decrease in the property tax levy for Fund 10. So we talked a lot about that and how that was impactful to our budget. So total revenue overall for Fund 10 is actually down. Our budget is down $120,912, and we talked about the ins and the outs of that. And I do have a summary that talks about that. And so again, this is by source and the types of revenue that are coming into Fund 10, where the differences are. Again, that top line is going to be our property taxes. Our line 2 is intra-districts within Wisconsin. That's really going to be our open enrollment amount from students going in and out. Intermediate source, we talked a lot about that, and that's an agreement that we have with CISA to provide distance learning for some world language classes. State source, that's going to be our per pupil aid and our equalized aid. Our federal source is going to be our federal grants, and our other revenue is just miscellaneous things that the district receives and isn't required to categorize them elsewhere. So overall, that's how you can get to the decrease of $120,912 in our revenue for Fund 10. So I promised that we'd look at the tax levy, and so you can see the tax levy overall is up in total by $479,984. One of the things that we found very interesting as we were reviewing this last week is that if you look at the total tax levy, it's up, but for our taxpayers, it's actually going down. And so that's a great thing for us in Eau Claire, because the property taxes will be lower, about $41 on a $100,000 property for this year. And the reason that that is because our equalized value goes up. And so as that equalized value goes up, that total levy is spread across the equalized value. And so that's why there's a decrease in our property taxes this year. And it's important, I just wanted to make sure that, again, we kind of talk about that $2.2 million that we set aside in the referendum to pay for debt. You can see that showing up under Fund 38 debt service, and you can see that tax levy is up $2.2 million, and that's directly related to that $25 million in debt that we issued in April. Our total operating expenses, when we look at where we ended last year at and our current budget for this year, our operating expenses are up just over $1.8 million, which is 1.33% of the budget. Ooh. And then I wanted to just refresh everybody's memory on how the expenses break down. And so we talked a lot about our salary and fringes and how that's the biggest part of our pie of all of our expenses. And you can see last year our salary and bennies accounted for 72.81% of our budget, and this year it accounts for 77.56% of our budget. And we spent a lot of time last week talking about that and the makeup, and so I just thought it might be nice to have it in a graph format to help everybody understand that impact. It's not surprising. I would say most school districts range from 75 to probably 85% of their budget in salary and benefits, and it makes sense because we're very much a people industry. Here was an additional list of items that had been requested in the budget that we have not approved. Additional time, which is related to mostly staff development, and then of course the benefits that are related to those additional times. Some additional purchase services, some additional supplies, and then any equipment that was not directly related for a safety purpose or being donated by a booster club has been cut out of the budget. And so those totals added up to another $1.5 million. And so our final operating budget, you can see our revenue is down when I put in funds 27 and 29, which is our special ed and our other special projects fund, is down $9,534. Our expenses are up 1.8, and then that brings us to the difference that we discussed last week. Are there any final questions on the budget?
We talked a little bit about sharing, I'm trying to find my list here, on some of the impacts on the budget. Can we talk a little bit about those?
Sure, we can. I wasn't sure if we wanted to slide on it or not, so I didn't put it up here. But again, that we talked a lot about the 1.8 and coming up with the projected deficit of where we're going to land. We had an increase in health insurance of 5.5%, and that's phenomenal. That goes to our contract with Security Health Plan. Many school districts are getting increases in the 15 to 20%. So 5.5% for us is about $900,000, and so again, it's contributing to those additional costs that we have from this year over last year. Some of the other things that we talked about last week at the board retreat were our support for private education. And so I don't remember all the numbers right off the top of my head, but we had close to $500,000 just for transportation and providing transportation to the private schools, and that is required of us by state statute. But we talked about being very transparent and sharing that with our community as well, because that is a cost that we're required to pay, and it does have an impact to our budget. I know I'm missing one more. Dr. Hardebeck, can you?
Decrease in class size.
Oh, yes, thank you. So the other big one was that the decrease in class size. So we're very excited this year that all of our classes are within the targeted class size range, and we had worked really hard with that and making projections for the referendum. And within the referendum, we had $1 million set aside to balance class sizes and be in compliance with our policy, and that cost was actually $1.8 million. for this year, and so again, that's another additional cost of $800,000. But we know that the community supported it, and as well as the board supporting it, that it was very important to be within those targeted class sizes. So when we talk about that $800,000 and the $900,000 for our increased health insurance, and then just continued support of private schools, I think that really shows why our expenses are up, and just a reflection that we have cut out all of the things that were cuts that we could make that were far away from kids, as far as like equipment or things that weren't already being donated to the district. So,
Do you want to specifically talk about the cuts?
sure, I can talk about the cuts. In equipment, I would say we've cut out all of the equipment for like buildings and grounds, so vehicles and dump trucks and just that big heavy equipment that we need, snow plowers, just to make sure that we can maintain our properties. iPads were a huge one. If we look at, we're in this process of needing an iPad and a device refresh, and so that cost is anywhere between $1.5 to $1.8 million. And so again, very important, and next year we're very concerned because some of our iPads are not going to be able to support the state testing that we're required to do. And so when we look at that, that was a big chunk addition to. So that 1.5 that I shared in cuts tonight was in addition to about 1.8 in cuts that we had made earlier, that were shared at an earlier board meeting. So when you look at it in total, we probably made about a little over $3 million in cuts when you consider all of the technology devices and equipment and additional time, and some of the professional development was cut back as well. And so it's a very trim budget this year, because we did put such a big emphasis on our staff and promoting that high quality staff piece of our strategic plan.
So I'd like to make a comment. I think we are thankful to our community, and when we went out to referendum, we thought we would probably get right in the middle or close. We're still $36 or something below the state average per pupil. We were 418, so it's better than that. And also the fact that funding in the state of Wisconsin is still broken. The money that came per pupil did not come fixing funding. It just pretty much kept the inequity going because it is per pupil outside of fixing school funding. So, I mean, I want that to be said in the way that our community understands this conversation about our budget within the big picture. So, Commissioner Luganville.
Could you talk a little bit, Abby, about the federal government and any decrease in funds this year in this proposed budget that we're expecting, and why that would be, and break that down for us?
Sure, yeah. So if we go back to that slide that talks about our decrease in the funding and where it's happening, you can see that our federal source, which is basically our federal grants, our projected beginning balance budget is $816,000 lower. And we talked a little bit about this last week too, and so that means that we have $816,000 worth of expenses that have been shifted, coming out of federal funds into our district budget. Part of that is we don't have our allocations yet. We just received our Title II allocation last week, I believe it was, and that allocation is down close to $150,000. And we use that heavily for professional development. And so when we asked the question of DPI as to why is that different, and overall the state allocation was much less, and some of it is from some cuts at the federal level, some of it, that allocation is based upon census data and free and reduced data, and it's from 2015 because there's a delay, and the state is funded based upon the federal, and so that's a piece of it. They didn't confirm directly that it's related to cuts at the federal level. Right now it's basically on the allocation formula. So I think our Title I funds are pretty comparable to what they were a year ago. I don't think there was any other significant big changes to the federal ones. Yeah, Title II was the one we were just talking about. So any other questions did I miss anything on the federal?
Was any of the federal pieces shifted because of more funds going to private?
Private schools, yes. That was the other part that I missed. So We have to put some more title funds and some more IDEA special ed funds to the private schools compared to what the allocation was last year. I think when I added them together, it was around $20,000. So again, just some, we're required to do that by the law. And it tells us right off the top, here's how much that you need to allocate to the private schools based upon the students that are attending those private schools. And so that would be included in that number as well.
Oops, Commissioner Luganville.
I guess, yeah, it is a trim budget. That's a good word for it. And of course, there's a lot out of our control. I will say I'm very thankful that the referendum did pass, or we'd be having a much gloomier, darker conversation even. And at least here, with what we're doing, it will not impact students and it will not impact our staff. And we're a people place. So if we're not hurting our people, that's good. But I guess I'm just wondering if there are things that we should or could be doing more now with hindsight and getting this information that we should or could be doing more in terms of planning. If you have any reflections on that or any things that you'd like us to think about and maybe come back to you with.
There's always reflection when you're going through this process because it's very challenging every year. And yeah, I think internally there's some things that we're going to do differently and just the review process and probably asking some additional questions and even just kind of thinking about the process a little bit. Are there things that we could be doing different and thinking outside the box a little bit? So it will look different. I can't tell you exactly how because I'm still, processing and digesting. As far as the board too, I think when I look back at our projections in January that I provided, a lot of them were right on target as to what, the original numbers came in. And so I think that made me feel really good too because I'm like, wow, this was very different. And that at that point in time, we had no idea what the state budget was. But now we do know what the state budget is for next year. So that will also help us in planning and being able to say, okay, we're going to have this additional amount. And so I think that, yeah, will we look at it differently? Yeah, we probably will and come up with some ideas, but I can't tell you what they are right now because I haven't quite figured that all out.
Anyone else have questions? Seeing none, I'll take a motion from the floor.
Approve the budget. I move to approve the budget.
Commissioner Duax moves to approve the budget. Do I have a second?
17, 18. Yeah, it's for 17, 18.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Luganville. Roll call vote, Patty, please.
Commissioner Harder,
Yes.
Commissioner Luganville,
Yes.
Commissioner Torres,
Yes.
Commissioner Bika,
Yes.
Commissioner Duax,
Yes.
Commissioner Hambuck-Boyle.
Yes. Thank you, Abby, for all your hard work and all the pages. Yeah. That takes us on to, I'm going to adjourn to committee reports. First one is the opening of schools and equity report, part 1. I think that's Mr. Schmidt. Oh, all three of you. Thank you. So Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Leibham, and Ms. Marks. Huh? Yeah. Dr. Hardebeck said it's the exec team in action.
Been dying to do that. Thank you for this opportunity. As we've done in the past, we're using the same format to give the board an overview of the start of the school year data. There's a lot of data here, and that's why we highlighted it as an overview. There may be questions that arise. Certainly you can ask them now, but if you're looking for more detail, we would ask that you submit those those requests to Dr. Hardebeck, and we could get you more detail if that's what you would be interested in. You'll get the majority of the information this evening, except the academic achievement area. which we are waiting until the state releases the report cards, hopefully in November, but it could be later. So there will be a subsequent follow-up to our presentation tonight. In line with the board goals, we do look at the board goals as we look at actions that we're taking in our implementation of those educational programs or decisions. We incorporate those in all that we do, and you'll see reference to the board goals and the strategic priorities in each of the slides to tie them together to see how we are fitting what it is we do to your interests. So we thought we'd start out with, and social emotional is really broad, is who are we as a student body? And it's important to know who our students are so we have an idea of who comes to us, 11,000 plus, every day. For this school year, the enrollment that we currently have on our third Friday count is 11,334 students. If we remove 86 of those students who started out the year as either fifth or sixth year seniors who would have been counted the year before, we have 11,248. And the APL projection, the Applied Population Laboratory, when they did their last demographic enrollment study in 2015, was anywhere between 11,000 and 11,249. So you can see we are obviously within that range, and this year on the higher end of their range. There have been other years when we've been on the lower end of the range. I should note that that study was done 4 school years ago. Their accuracy over the last 10 or 12 years has been really good within 5 years. Then it tapers off a little bit, so something the Demographics Committee might want to consider in the near future, having another updated study. When we look at grade levels, as you can see, our pre-K numbers are well above what had been projected. The APL over the years has identified 89.5% of a eligible student population taking 4K. We're significantly higher than that in the Eau Claire Area School District, and that's why those numbers are higher. It's hard to project what those are going to be because the state does not require 4K for attendance.
Can I ask a question on that? Mm-hmm. Are those numbers higher because of open enrollment?
The open enrollment numbers have been fairly steady over the years. Certainly it contributes to that, yes, but they haven't, this bump has not been just because of open enrollment. And then you can look at K5, you can see where the APL range was. And again, we are well within that. 6-8, again, toward the higher end. 9-12, this year we're down a little bit. When you look at open enrollment does affect our 9-12 student body, especially with alternate open enrollment. It's not unique to the Eau Claire School District. We have high school students entering and leaving the school district based on open enrollment throughout the year almost weekly. So that number will change daily, but our open enrollments are affecting high school enrollment, which is not unique again to either our district as a larger district compared to smaller districts around us or districts in general.
Commissioner Duax has.
Didn't you talk maybe a year or two ago about the enrollment going down slightly as we got to the high school enrollment?
Yes.
You know, but now it's going to eventually go back up.
Yes. Overall, it's inching up as we go. You'll see trends that are still showing the high school enrollment increasing. Just we lose some at the high school because of open enrollment, but the numbers are still inching upward. Here you can see, in fact, to that question, a 5-year trend. You can see again our early learning numbers, our elementary numbers, middle school, high school, and then the district. When we look at students who are meal assistants, these are based on the third Friday count. The numbers change a little bit as the year progresses, but for the roughly the last 10 years, 9 years, we have been quite steady between 38-41%, so right around that 40% mark. Breaking meal assistance down by school. These are our elementary schools. The noted 5 schools are AGR schools, or what used to be SAGE. You can see the percentage ranking from highest to lowest, and then also the corresponding number of students based on school enrollment.
I ask a quick question about I know we started a fund now for assistance for families, and in the past school year, I think it was near the end of the school year that they started that. Is that going pretty well and covering a lot in terms of the students with unpaid accounts?
Is it okay for me to talk about this? I think what you're referring to is the meal accounts.
Yeah.
And so we have received some donations from people in the community and some organizations to cover the unpaid meals accounts. And I think it's working pretty well. I think actually you'll probably find out about it on the next gift report, but we actually had a large donation last week that covered any unpaid meal balances at that point in time as well. So I think it's working pretty well. You know, you always learn as you're going through the process. So, but yeah, our families have been very fortunate from those donations.
Yep. And then if we look at our secondary schools again, based on meal assistance. Then when we look at the elementary level, class size and school capacity. It's important to know when we look at school capacity, this is not based on square footage, it's based on the number of classrooms available per school, if it's a 2-section school, a 3-section school, or a 4-section school. We then also looked at what the targeted class range would be, and in K3 it's 25 students a class, and in 4-5 it's 29 students in a class. So assuming a uniform enrollment, all with the 25 students per class, space and capacity at the 2-section schools are at this point pretty well full, although it shows 31 and 24 seats available. When you spread that out over 12 classes, that's a very narrow window, very small margin of what you could take at any one given grade level. When we look at our 3-section schools, again, you can see most of the schools are fairly well full. 3 of them clearly have space available, as we already know, with placing our open enrolled students there. Davie, Locust Lane, and Longfellow. Northwoods would have some space available, but the others, again, even with 52 at Putnam Heights, when you run a 3-section school or 18 classrooms, that does not allow a lot of space at any one grade level for a bump in enrollments. And in the 2011, Robbins and Sherman were expanded to be 4-section schools. As you can see that within that short period of time as well, although space is available, they are filling quite rapidly. When we looked at the elementary level for our non-AGR class size, and we removed the AGR schools because there the state does provide some additional funding to reduce class sizes in some ways. This year, 100% of the grade levels fall within the targeted range of 25 or less K3, 25 or less K3, 29 or less 4-5. It should be noted that there are a number of schools that are right at the top range of the targeted class size, but they do fall within that board-approved range. We also looked at alternate school requests. Families requesting to attend another school and principals approving the transition. Many of these could include, or some of these could include, students who are currently in 4th grade. If they start 4th grade and the family moves, we still have them do an alternate school request. The board policy does allow the child to remain in that elementary school for grades 4 and grade 5. So that would be part of it. Those numbers do not seem, in my opinion, problematic or troubling. And at the secondary level, same process. There, once you start 9th grade or 6th grade and move, the family, if they can provide their own transportation, may allow a student to complete the 3 years of middle school or the 4 years of high school, but again, we still have them fill out an alternate school request, and those are reflected in those numbers. And then we would look at Chippewa Valley Montessori, which is our one school that has in addition to McKinley, but a waiting list, more interest than space available. but also has a district-wide attendance area. You can see the enrollments by elementary school. The open enrolled are phasing out. We, with enrollment procedures as they are and admission processes that the Montessori school has in place, those open enrolled students are older in age, older grades, and will eventually work themselves out, where that number would most likely be 0.
And you explain that because of the waiting list of our own students.
That's correct, and the way they admit students. They begin admitting students to Chippewa Valley Montessori in February and March before the open enrollment window closes.
I just wanted everybody to know why we,
And then overall, open enrollment, you can see in and out. Keep in mind, this is based on the third Friday count. In the bump in numbers, this is what I'm getting at. I believe it was the 2014-15 school year when the state of Wisconsin allowed families through alternate open enrollment to apply for open enrollment virtually any time of the school year. So in effect, Wisconsin has year-round open enrollment. And we have students for any reason coming in or leaving our district on a fairly regular basis. And it has bumped those numbers. And just because somebody enrolls out doesn't mean they remain out. They may be out for a period of time and it doesn't work and they come right back in. So it's something the state might want to consider looking at some point. So then, who are we relative to some of the programming that we have? You can see our district enrollment. The percentage of students who, when this enrollment was taken, is about 38% free and reduced, 14% are in gifted and talented, 12% in special ed, and a little over 3% receiving English language services. So when we break those down and we say within our gifted and talented population, 16% of them are free and reduced or meal assisted, 3% are in special education, and 1.5% are receiving English language services. In special education, 49% of them are students who are on meal assistance, 6.5% roughly are also identified as gifted and talented, and 3.3% are also receiving EL services. And then when you look at students who are just in the EL program, just under 20% are on meal assistance, about 7.5% are also in gifted and talented, and slightly over 13% are in EL. In special ed. So we took the same format, and instead of breaking by ethnicity, we simply broke it down by racial codes. You can see district-wide what our racial composition is. The last 10 years or more, we have seen increase in students of color coming to the Eau Claire School District, and likely families of color. And you then can see corresponding percentages of the number of those students based on their racial identity who are in gifted and talented, who are in special education, and who receive EL services. Oop. Yeah. We made this adjustment and it didn't stick. This number, the way the federal government identifies race, we broke out and identified Latino, Hispanic individuals separate from also a category of white, so this number really should be at about 73%, not 80. The 7.6 should be removed from the 80.7. It just didn't. It didn't stick or connect when we tried to change that.
So I won't look at it. That is an outlier, right?
No. So that is an overview of who our students and in some ways families are.
Because that, when we talked at a prior presentation, because of the diversity of our students, and also because our students go into a diverse environment outside of the district, about the culturally relevant practices that we have been incorporating into the work last year and this year in particular. That is being shared also with our instructional staff through that literacy within supportive learning environment work, and also additional briefs for our non-instructional staff. And as we mentioned, also our new staff members all go through that training during the August new employment week that happens in the third week in August. And finally, there's also a culturally responsive practice toolkit that we have been developing for principals as they work on their school improvement plans. So it's that like I said, those two reasons, not just the students in our district, but where they're going to prepare them for that world. Additionally, part of our other social emotional data, and one of the indicators is that attendance rate. As you can see, we've been pretty steady. We tend to fluctuate right around that 94% area for the past few years. The state and the district is down just a little bit this past year. And again, it'll be interesting to see if that's just a one-year blip, but there is a slight drop in the last year. Some of the other indicators for social emotional data, and this comes from the Family Climate Survey from parents and guardians about the safety of, one of those pieces is that we have safe, supportive learning environment. You've seen some of these data earlier when we did some of our other survey presentations, but this is looking at safety at school and aware of procedures. You can take a scan. If you remember, one of the goals is typically to have our data at about 80% or higher. And the first two areas, obviously this first one's way above, this one's right just over 80%. We're a little bit lower in terms of the consistent discipline, and we're right near 80% on the respect piece, but the last two again are in the 70s. So something for us to look into, and we're going to talk about a couple of areas where that can be worked on over the course of the next year. You've seen this one as well earlier, and if you remember, these are that student engagement, overall engagement. These numbers in parentheses is that national benchmarking we talked about earlier, and so the district on overall engagement for our students. I remember the last one was about the family survey. This is the student engagement survey, and that goal, excellent, is being at that, it's a Likert scale from 1 to 4, so you want to be at a 3 or higher. So consistently at or above 3, but there's a little bit of drop here, but this is typical with other districts where you see that engagement drop as the students get older. Part of that is obviously with the adolescent age student becoming more independent, so a little less engaged in some areas of their school experience. And then this is the cognitive engagement, that academic piece. This is that social and emotional engagement. And again, we are consistently higher, significantly higher in social and emotional engagement than we are in the cognitive engagement. You can see those scores against national benchmarks as well. And we do score as a district very, 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 very high scores. Back to the Family Climate Survey, looking at more of that a few other indicators of social emotional engagement. The interest in extracurricular activities. This one, again, if we look at that 80% benchmark, we're over that. We're much lower though on the specifically about athletic programs. This mirrors what we see though in terms of overall participation in the athletic program, and then excitement to school, we're just a bit under that 80%. And again, this is looking at all grades, including the grades 11 and 12, which usually score a little bit lower. Shifting to collaborative cultures. What's been updated? We've been doing school improvement plans have been a big part of our district for the past few years, but really working even harder this past year to work on that alignment between school, district office resources, and the strategic plan. We've been having monthly meetings, bringing principals in to teaching and learning director meetings to work on this. Had just another one happen this afternoon. Very robust discussions to work on that alignment. And also a lot of district collaborative teams, such as literacy within supportive learning environments, the emergency management work group. Back to that student safety issue I talked about earlier, this is the group that oversees that. We have district-wide instructional planning collaboration teams, such as school psychologists, school social workers, special education teachers, just to name a few that work on during each of our instructional planning afternoons, and then the principal meetings as well. Some other indicators of a collaborative environment. This is looking at the, do we have someone to, now this is from the student perspective of looking at that, or I'm sorry, the family perspective about the relationship between their child and the school. Again, looking at that 80% number, way above here, a bit above here, and just a hair bit below that 80% benchmark here in terms of the perception of families about the relationship, that collaborative relationship between the child and the school and the instructors and the adults in that school. This gets a little bit into the details behind the support. And you can see that trend we talked about earlier decreases as students get older, kind of levels off, looking at 3.0. So we got about 3 different areas here where we're just a bit under that 3 mark. But you can see, again, this is from the student perspective now, not from the family perspective about the support from the adults in the school. So again, we see numbers that are at or very close to being at, and then above what we would consider a target for engagement. We look at also for collaboration some technology, and the reason why we have technology in here is that technology is bringing us to a place where we can have much more virtual collaboration, and part of that has to be based upon a platform. So you'll see the internet presence in the district. You'll see these are our web page views have dropped a little bit, but at the same time our Facebook reaches have gone up. These are each unique person, and at these numbers, I mean, we've gone from the numbers are this is a bit over half of a million unique people that Facebook has reached for the district. Now these numbers are pretty big too. But these are the traffic. This is at 4.5 million yet. So we're still, you know, we're running through a lot of people's devices right now as a district. You see our Twitter followers is climbing. I'm one of those 707, so if you don't know how to follow Twitter, we'll do a little instruction at the end of the session today, get more of you to sign up. We got some cool stuff going on there. This morning I was woken up to a great little post, so there's lots of interesting stuff going out there. Our Facebook posts as a district and the number of likes has gone up as well. So we're shifting a little bit more toward that social media, and again, creating that space for a collaborative environment for both families and for our staff and students. So this is a figurative diagram of our district. This is not just some sort of random painting of Jackson Pollock or anything like that. This is represents actually the exciting piece of finishing out our fiber optic network in the district. And so that fiber optic network that the district now owns through the Chippewa Valley Internet Networking Consortium now allows for a more equitable access to the internet. It's 10 times faster than what we used to have in the district. We have our return investment in just over 3.5 years with a savings after that of $65,000 a year. So we're very excited about that. But you can't do that, and you can't have that collaborative environment without having the backbone. And so that's now in place. You can see also that as time has gone on, we've shifted more to a wireless environment. These are our wireless access points. These little things that you see right there with the little blue light, and over somewhere back there with a light. I've noticed. And then the network switches has gone down because we're able to have more devices going through one switch. And if you can think about it, switches are expensive. They require programming. Less switches is better. If you're able to still have the same level of performance, which we have. So we're shifting to a much more mobile, collaborative environment. And you can see our desktops have gone down. Desktop computing, our iPads have slowly increased. Of course, there's going to be a little bit of due to the budget, a little bit of a pause there. As Abby mentioned earlier, Chromebooks have gone up, as have laptops. So we're getting much more into a mobile environment for collaboration for technology than a static one. Also, our learning management system, Canvas. And this is just meant to show, we've been slowly rolling this out based on when buildings are ready, but this creates that online learning platform for students and their students, teachers, and families to be able to communicate online learning space, and it's slowly been increased as time has gone on. And you look like you want to bring something up.
So, Jim, could you just explain a little bit more about Canvas and how schools are using Canvas to collaborate?
Absolutely. So actually in 2 significant ways. So Canvas is the old Blackboard, if you will, where it's that online place where you have an exchange of content, and students can turn papers in, teachers can deliver content, so forth. And so, but it's used, so and there's an online, there's a portal for parents to be able to access as well. So it's a place where students and teachers can interact, but the parents can have a way in as well. But it's also used in a second way. It's used for teacher professional development amongst their staff. So the principal and the leadership team will create that as an online learning space for adults as well. So it has a twofold place, because it has that classroom piece, but it has that online learning for our staff. And it's served to be, it's very user-friendly and has a lot of robust tools that have promoted that online collaboration. Is there anything else that I said about? Okay. A little bit pieces you should be aware of as well. We will get attacked. Every district will get attacked. And anyone who hosts anything will get attacked online world. And so always at the forefront of our thinking is, if we're going to create these online learning spaces, we have to create the security to protect our student data, protect our students from online predators and everything from phishing to spam. There's a lot of stuff out there. So these are a few of the tools that are in place to be able to do that. And again, Tim's team, that emergency management work group team, is a big piece of this, and that's really a nice intersection between the type of work that's being done, that James Martin is leading, the technology group, but there's also that district-wide perspective as well, because if we're going to live in this space, we have to try to protect the adults and students in this space as well. Shift over to high-quality staff.
Good evening. Okay, so when we look at high-quality staff, we have a couple of areas that we've been working on for a period of time, and Jim had spoke to some of these regarding the PDIP days and being able to use those as a focus on strategic priorities and building goals. That's been something that's been going on for a couple of years, and we've found a lot of success with those PDIP days. In addition to that, and this one, even though it's changed, I left it up here just so we could talk about it for a minute. So the district's been working to support teachers in their professional development plan process, which had been leading to their DPI licensure. Now, I'm sure all of you know that that is changing, that we're now going to be looking at lifetime licenses. And so there's been a lot of questions by staff about, so what does this mean? I'm partially through my PDP. You know, I've signed up for some classes, you know, what do I need to do? So I left it up there just so that we could talk about the fact that that is changing, and so our support in that area will look very different because it will no longer be required for our staff. However, the support will come in helping them work through that transition and make sure that everybody's up to speed on what it is they do need to do for their licensure process. The development of the Focused Mentor Program, that was something we've worked on for a handful of years, and we've got that in place. Recruitment is obviously part of our high quality staff strategies, and just to spend a little bit of time on recruitment, we've expanded the focus of this to really focus on diversity, and that's something that the board has asked us to do. I feel confident in saying that bringing diverse adults into school districts is a challenge, and it's a challenge across the state for the majority of districts in the state. And the reason for that is, if you look at the stats that come out of our UW system schools, there isn't a lot of diversity that's going into the UWs to come out of the UWs to come into our districts. So when I look at the majority of the stats that are available to us regarding diversity, what we have, and we'll get more into this in a few slides, it really mirrors what our local schools, Stout and Eau Claire, are graduating out of their College of Education. So I feel confident that in terms of at least what's available for us in our neighboring districts to be able to secure into our community, we're being successful in doing that. However, because there isn't the populace to look at from the UW schools, districts need to start being creative. And part of that creativity for us includes growing our own. So there's a couple different ways that we're looking at that. One, as you can tell, the Educator Rising program, and that's looking at students within the school district who have an interest in going into education, and working with those students at both North and Memorial to be able to support them in their endeavor of becoming educators. So that's the Educator Rising program that we're exploring. And in addition to that, districts need to, again, think outside of the box, and if we can't find diverse populations to come to Eau Claire, then let's look at what we already have in Eau Claire in our own community and reach out to those populations to see what kind of partnerships we can develop to try to encourage more adults to come and be role models within our district, and not just from a volunteer standpoint, but from an employment standpoint. So I have meetings set up with our local Hmong leaders as well as the Hispanic and Latino leaders within the community to be able to start those conversations to say, how can we help one another to reach this goal of having a more diverse population within our school district. There are some districts within the state that have been working on kind of a grow your own program for a handful of years, and they've got some very in-depth detailed information that they're willing to share with me, so that will help so that we don't need to recreate the wheel. We can look at what neighbors down to the south have done and try to use the experiences that they've had to pave the way as we move forward. So that's our recruitment and educator rising focus. Hires by licensure for your comparison. So this is just simply some data that we've looked at over the past years that we've been doing this report for you. And so if you go back to 2014-15 all the way up to this school year, you can see how we've really ebbed and flowed in regard to total FTEs that have been hired within the district. So the 16-17 school year, we brought in just over 110 FTEs. Now we're talking professional, this isn't any support staff, this is just our professional certified staff. So that was a big year, that was a lot of hires. This past year, coming into 17-18, we've only had to bring in just over 61 FTEs. So, and you can see that the difference between elementary, early childhood, and special education being the areas that we focused on 5 years ago when we started to look at this, you can see that the trend in those areas, what that looks like for each year, with this year for elementary being the lowest that we've had to secure more elementary teachers than we have in the past handful of years. And then special education, again, ranging anywhere from the 7.3 to the 22, we're kind of right in the middle at about 11. So this year hasn't been all that challenging in terms of bringing in additional FTE as we had experienced in some previous years. So that again was just a 4-year comparison with a handful of different areas. When we look at the most hired licenses within the past 5 years, this one I always find interesting because obviously it changes from year to year when we look at this. So our elementary, this part hasn't changed. Our elementary education FTEs has always been at the top of this list for each of the 5 years that we've been looking at this. So within the past 5 years, we were looking at 81 FTEs in elementary education. Now remember, when we talk FTEs, that's not actual, in insurance language, we call it belly buttons, how many people are on the insurance plan. But when we talk FTEs, that's full-time equivalents and not necessarily how many bodies are making that up. So just want to make sure everybody's aware of that differentiation. Special ed coming in right after elementary ed at 65.4, then math, English, science, early childhood, and then social studies. So over the past 5 years, those have been the most sought after licenses that we needed here in the district. When we look at the district-wide positions at the elementary level, this is always an interesting slide to me because if we look at the number of FTEs, if you kind of just black out or put some white out across the screen on 3rd grade, you can see that we have more FTEs in the younger grades, and as you go through, it's less and less FTEs, which has to do with our formula for targeted class size. However, that 3rd grade has been a bubble year since they started in kindergarten, and it's always been just, you know, a smidge over what the other areas were, and so that kind of throws that whole flow of more FTEs to less FTEs as the students get older. That 3rd grade bubble throws a wrench into that, but again, that's been consistent since this year's 3rd graders were in kindergarten. Now breaking that down, what you just saw, into our professional staff count for elementary buildings. This is always an interesting slide to me as well, because when we look at the total number of enrollment for each building, and you can see that these schools are listed in order of FTE. So the highest FTE being at Sherman at 39.9, and the lowest FTE being at Montessori at 19.4. But then when you look over at the grid, and I, as a visual learner, always appreciate this. But if we look over at the grid and we consider our schools that have title and AGR staffing funding that gets put into their formulas for their building staff, and again, this is just professional staff, none of our support staff, you can see that, for example, Sherman has both in terms of title and AGR. And if you look at their line, the very first one, their blue line is much higher than their orange line. So their FTE is higher than their student enrollment.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Sherman's also a cluster site that has a higher incidence of special ed, so would that impact it as well?
It could, yes. Yep. And then if we look at Robbins, which has neither title nor AGR, their blue line is less than their orange line. So in most cases, that's what you'll see as you work through this grid, to see that there's usually more FTE allocated in the buildings with title and AGR. However, we've been losing some title funding as things go along, so that looks a bit different than what it has in the past couple of years. And I would anticipate that we'll continue to see those changes as we roll forward. Secondary staff, professional counts, same type of thing. We've got the 2 middle schools that have some title funding. Again, each year this gets a little less, but you can see that the grid as well at the secondary level is similar to what we looked at for elementary. And the total district professional staff that's in the schools is 817.1 FTE. And later on you'll see that there's a professional number of like 887, but that includes everybody. People at the district office that support the buildings, that are in professional positions, which would obviously be higher than what we have in the buildings. But our building FTE is just over 817. Our district staffing report regarding gender and ethnic groups. Basically, the first bullet's the only one that's a little bit different than what you've seen in the past years, and that's to show that our Asian male population and our Hispanic Latino populations have grown just slightly over the past 5 years. Everything else has stayed relatively the same in terms of either having no fluctuation there in bullet number 2, and the fact that nearly all district staff are white at 96.2%. And we continue to have females outnumber males 3 to 1. That's been consistent since we started reporting this to the board. So that hasn't changed. So when we look at this slide, this relates to our staffing. So new hires, as you saw in a previous slide for this year, we had 61 new hires. We had 56 employees who transferred. So the easiest way to look at this grid is to look at the transfers being 56, and that means anybody who was in a professional position within the district, somehow they moved and went somewhere else. So maybe they were at Davie and they moved to Sherman, or somehow they had a choice in saying, I want to be doing this somewhere else. And so those are our 56 transfers. Our reassigns are positions where there really wasn't a choice for that person. And that doesn't include when we do staffing and we have some teachers that are displaced because there isn't enough FTE in the building they're currently in, because they also get a choice in where they go. So those folks would be counted in the transfers because we give them a list of the openings in the district, and then they let us know their preference in terms of where they want their new position to be. But reassigns would be, for example, we saw during the summertime when Tim and I go over staffing that there was a big bump in somebody's student enrollment. And so we hired another teacher. But then once we saw we talk about the whites of their eyes, then there really wasn't the need in that particular building for that particular staff member that we added. So at that point in time, we look at where the district need is the greatest and say, okay, this last hire is going to be moved here. And so they're reassigned without any input of their own, other than to say, yes, I'm still happy I have a job, so I'll go wherever you want me to go. And that's usually the way that works. And you can see that from 13, 14 through this current year, that happens very, very infrequently. And then our reemployments, we've had 3 folks that at one point in time were our employees and left for whatever reason, and they've come back and they're working with us again this year. So it's a total of 120 types of staffing changes that needed to happen this year. When we look at schools that have staff ethnicity and race that are other than white, both certified and support staff, there's a listing there of each of the schools that we have those individuals within the building. This looks wonderful from the standpoint of we have these individuals in the building to work with our students. However, in all honesty, because I'm in HR and integrity and honesty is forefront, there might be one person who's going to 4 different buildings. And so they're counted because they are servicing the students in all 4 of those buildings, but it's the same person because they travel throughout the district. Which doesn't take away from the fact that that person's available for the students in that building. It's just, when you look at this, it looks like, oh my gosh, look at all these folks that we have, and clearly that's not the case, or our recruitment efforts wouldn't be as strong as what they are. Professional staff turnover rate for a 5-year summary. You can see that back in 13-14, the percentage of turnover was just over 7%, then it was nearly 9%, then it was about 10.5%, and then last year started to go back down again, and then this year, you know, only having from July 1 to this point, we're at 1.24%. But you can kind of, again, when we look at the ebbs and flows, I think that after the compensation model went into place, we had less turnover. You can see, I mean, that's from like almost 10.5 to just over 7. So that's a 3% decrease in our turnover, which is wonderful. The 5-year summary, breaking that down a little bit more. So in those 5 years, we'd have almost 100 FTEs that retired, almost 90 FTEs that resigned and didn't provide a reason for their resignation. But then of the folks that did provide a reason for the resignation, 40 of them had gone to another district. Almost 16 of those FTEs chose to stay at home with family, and then 11 people totally left the education profession altogether and took a job outside of education. Those were the three highest reasons that were provided, which is why we shared those. Average teaching years of experience. So at the elementary level, we range from 11.4 years to 16.4 years. So from Locust Lane and Sherman, both being tied at 11.4 years of average teaching experience of the teachers that are currently in their building, to Flynn's 16.4. Now keep in mind, this includes all teaching years, not just here in the district. So it's a compilation of each teacher's teaching years, both in and out of the district. And so then at the middle school, you can see 12.7 versus 14.4. And then at the high school, 13.7 to 15.4. And then each of our 3, Prairie Ridge kind of has a category of their own at 11, and then Montessori at 10.6 and McKinley at 17.2. And so if you look at the blue bars, I always find this interesting, because when we think about the fact that, it takes a village, we have on average, there isn't any building in the district that on average has less than 10 years of combined experience within their building, which I think is wonderful. So I always find that to be an interesting piece. Elementary teaching staff, so here's that same information that's broken down. The 16.4 that we talked about at Flynn comes out of 26.3 FTE, and you can see in the grid that the blue area is the FTE, and then the total average years of teaching is our orange line. So basically the same information we saw before, just detailed by building. And then here's the secondary information, and I just love the McKinley visual, because there's so few FTE at McKinley, with only 8 FTE being there, but their average total years of teaching is 17.2. So their blue line all the way up to the orange line, there's such a gap there, which just really tells us that the folks that are at McKinley, they've been around for a long time, and they really know their stuff, and they love what they do in the population of students that they work with. So I love that visual. But again, similar to what you've seen in the others. When we look at our teacher education and college degrees, obviously all 887 of our teachers have their bachelor's degree, because it's required for their position. And then we break it down a little bit further. At this point in time, at least the HR office is not aware of any of our teachers that have a doctorate degree. If there's anybody out there that does and they haven't communicated with us, they should probably let us know that, because you could receive additional compensation for that, for securing that degree. Just over 53% of our teachers also have a master's degree, and then 3.5% of our teachers are also nationally board certified, with 31 of our teachers being nationally board certified out of the 887. Moving on to support staff. These 5 areas have routinely been where we find the most FTE in our support positions. So special ed assistants, our SEAs, are almost 115 FTE. All of our buildings and grounds custodial position, combining all of those different positions, equates to 72 FTEs. Our GSAs, or general school assistants, are almost 43. And then cooks, assistant cooks, and first cooks at 37. And our BEAs have actually increased, and we have more FTEs in that area than what we have in the past, which correlates to what Tim, I think, had indicated when our student demographic is changing. And so here's how the staff demographic, or the needs for the staff to support students, is also changing with that. Similar information to what we saw before, only with support staff. So you can see again each of the FTEs for our elementary buildings, and the orange correlating line with student enrollments. So because the title and AGR monies for these buildings aren't necessarily attributed to support staff, you don't see the same type of correlation that we did with the professional staff grid, because I would say that now with the monies in title getting less and less, that whenever possible, building principals try to use that money to secure more certified FTE. So that's why it doesn't look as similar. Same thing for the secondary. You can see our student enrollments. We've got the two middle schools that have the title funding, and then the FTE, as it goes down, is pretty consistent with the student enrollment. And then our recruitment initiatives, we changed up the way that we looked at WeCan this year. So WeCan, for those of you who don't know, is the statewide, it's like the statewide educational place to go to if you're looking for a job. And it's supported through UW-Madison. And in the past, we indicated how many active applicants there were for professional staff positions. And this year we changed it. We looked at how many active licenses are there, because obviously multiple people have multiple licenses. So we're looking at almost 76,000 active licenses that are listed out in WeCan. And as part of the recruitment efforts that we've attempted in the past, sometimes when we have hard to fill positions, we'll use the filters within WeCan to sort out who within the system has the license that we need. And then we email them directly to say, heads up, there's positions available here in Eau Claire if you're interested. So we can target specific licensures and try to get that connection going with people that have the license that it is that we need. Other than that, you can see all the different recruitment fairs that we go to in an attempt to make early connections with upcoming graduates. Just in 2 weeks, we'll be going to the UW-Madison Educator Recruitment Fair. That's a wonderful opportunity for us to get in front of the new graduates and try to get them interested in having a connection within Eau Claire, so that we can try to be the first line that they think of when they look at where it is they want to go after they graduate. And that's been a wonderful opportunity for us. We've also tried some of the Minnesota recruitment fairs. We do our own open house, obviously. That's gone over very well since we started that. We work with the placement offices. So there's a multitude of things that we continue to do to reach out to new folks.
Okay, can I was just reading an article on the decrease in the numbers of students going into education. Are you seeing that as well? I even heard almost like a decrease of 65%. Is it really that large?
I believe that it is. And in working with the placement offices through our professional staff organization within the state, they've indicated that College of Ed in most universities, you know, they're changing their criteria to be able to get into the college. So it's not as rigorous or stringent as what it had been in the past, because they can't even get to the basement, let alone the ceiling of what it was that they were having prior to. So yes, we are seeing those same things. And then support staff, again, we use Weekend for that, our open house, local media things. And in addition to that, we go out to a multitude of different, you know, like the expo and so on and so forth, to be able to try to recruit people to come and work with us as a support staff member. Partnerships and families.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a reminder of a piece of data though that we had shared earlier. Remember, this was the first year that our students that graduated indicated it was one of the top 5 professions was education. So that's
I know, that's the hope.
Yeah. So that Kay's not seeing that yet, and so but they just graduated, so they have to still get in that ed program. That's a couple of years out yet. So, all right, our last of the 5 areas, partnerships with family and communities. You've seen this data as well. This is that 83% of families scoring the district as an A or B. Just a little indicator, first of all, on how families perceive us overall as a district. I believe the year before it was 84. And when Dr. Hardebeck shared the Springstead survey, if you recall, which was of all people in the community, not just our families, that was at 80%. So pretty robust numbers at 80 or higher, depending on the year, and the group surveyed were pretty high as a district. This is that piece about for partnerships in terms of involvement in our schools at least once. 66% of the families that participated in the survey last year or last spring indicate that they would be volunteering at least once in our schools. Looking also at the statements about feeling welcomed and that do I feel like this is a collaborative place in our schools? This is one of the sets of questions that we looked at. And really in all these areas, we're scoring at or above that 80%, being informed about activities, what's being learned, the behavior, etc. So very strong numbers in this area. And pretty strong in the first half here, but not the second half. Looking at availability of teachers and opportunities for me to be involved are very high. But this gets back into that feeling welcome in my to use the facilities and understanding that process. So that gets into that piece about facilities rental. So this has still been a bit of an issue for us as a district in terms of scoring, in terms of that collaboration with our parents. And then finally, and I apologize to anyone not on this list, this is a sample list, and we keep updating this list every year of different partnerships. And I keep referring people back to when the Urban Task Force came to Eau Claire, and they were just amazed at the connections that happened in this district. And I remember the question being asked, what would happen if our partnerships didn't exist? And we all looked around and realized we'd be in bad shape because we have such strong support for our public schools with our agencies and businesses in the community. I also want to thank, before we take any questions, Michelle Radke, our Director of Assessment, and Megan Hodacek, our Information Analyst, because most of what you're seeing was put together by those two, and they've done it for the last few years and do a great job. So, you know, Kay and Tim and I get to be the mouthpiece, but that was really a strong effort on their part, so thank you.
Thanks, Michelle and Megan.
Questions?
Any questions from the board? Well done. No questions. Woohoo.
I have a couple of questions.
Oh, do you? Okay, Lori, go ahead.
I wondered, this is mostly for Kay, I guess, do you think there would be any value in cultivating the relationship with UW Milwaukee's education program as you have with Madison?
Yes. So the reason that we have it with Madison is because they put on this recruitment fair that we get invited to, and I get asked to speak on a panel that, you know, helps new graduates understand how to be better prepared for interview processes. The UW Milwaukee hosts a fair, but it's not an education fair. And so they have an event, but it's for all of the areas of their university and not specifically targeted to to educators. And that's the reason that we haven't gone to that, because there's been others that are specific to education, which we found was probably a bigger bang for we got more value out of those.
This is a very minor point, but Jim, you pointed out a few areas where you thought might be problem spots. So the example would be accessing the facilities. But is it correct or incorrect that there's not a response option for something like does not apply? I think it's just don't know, which might reflect a family that's really not interested in facilities. And the other two that you pointed out were the presence of gangs in the schools or guns in the schools. But again, a family not being necessarily informed doesn't always signal a problem.
So let's first start with the facilities question. Actually, let's come back here a little bit. It's a don't know. Yeah. So, right, so the actual agree and the strongly agree and agree are 44%. And then this is that don't know area, you're right. So there's a significant.
Yeah, so if people had like a not applicable option, those numbers would shift around.
Yeah, we could.
It's a minor. It's a minor.
Right,
point.
right. Yeah, I know exactly what you're thinking. You're getting into that surveying. Yeah, I could actually make a note of that and talk to our consultant. That'd be an interesting conversation to have. The other one you asked about was, can you repeat that? Oh yeah, the safety piece, right?
Yeah.
Before I make us all spin and look at the.
There was a sizable portion of don't know for
Yeah.
those two items. And again, I don't know that it signifies a problem.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So you're just saying the comment about it being problematic? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Thanks, Lori. Can I ask a question? Kay, do we have an average age of retirement now? And I don't need to know, but if you have to, I'm just wondering if it's changed over time.
I'll look into that. Off the top of my head, if I were to venture a guess, I would say that people are staying longer now than what they had been in the past. But I can tell you that every year questions come up about the board's work with OPEB and what does that look like and will there be changes? And that's one constant that we hear on an annual basis. But in terms of an actual kind of an average year, we can do the data and pull that.
I'd be interested.
Sure.
Thank you. Commissioner Luginbill? I guess we do have questions.
Well, I just thought of one, and actually throughout some of the various agenda items tonight, specific to our Black and African American students, because in the equity report that we approved, it shows that there isn't a single Black student involved in Honor Society in the whole school district. We don't have. We have obviously the numbers now of the disproportionality with Black students in special education, and I've had some conversations about that already, and I think, and now in talking about HR and not having having really a lot of staff of color throughout the district, I think there's a real opportunity for an aligned group to get together, not in any specific vacuum, but just get a lot of people around the table to start that conversation of how do we look at this systemically, you know, with our Black and African American students. And I know we don't have any sort of, we haven't had necessarily a mechanism or group in the past that has ever worked with families who are Black or African American. And so I'm hoping that maybe that can be an outcome. And I know there's some interest, so I'm hoping that we can see that, because it's such an obvious theme throughout a lot of the reports in various areas tonight. So
It was, that piece was on page 18. I pulled that out too as kind of a outlier to talk about. Thanks, Joe, for bringing that up.
Thank you. We have begun conversations with Uniting Bridges for that exact reason. So the groups that Kay was talking about for both the Latino population and the Hmong population, but we have done the same for our African American population as well.
Good, thanks. I think we're done. Thanks. Thank you very much, executive team. Thank you for all your hard work. It's greatly appreciated. So we go on to the Memorial High School secure entrance item under committee reports, and I think that's Larry. Hi, Larry.
Prior to the meeting, we provided floor plans, both the original concept and then the revised one that we're down to, as well as information for the board. So open up to any questions that you may have. I can deal with the building and cost aspect of that. Trevor's here if we have questions regarding use of the facility.
So Larry, can you reiterate again the cost differences in the original to the new drawing?
The revised plan that we have, we're estimating that it's around $480,000 over the money that we had originally allocated for the secure entrance and the gymnasium heating project as a total.
Anyone else have a question? I was wondering then, the makeup on other projects, can you be a little specific about where that's going to come from?
This current summer of 2017, even with doing the additional boiler and chiller work at Memorial, we're projecting, I believe it is $500,000 savings in the projects from this year. Next year, we've committed already to doing all the boilers and chillers at North. We see that as basically a break even next year, even doing that additional work. And then we're projecting another $750,000 in savings in year 3, the summer of 2019. Again, provided that we don't see a drastic change in oil prices.
Okay, thank you. Did you have a question there? Commissioner Harder?
Could you just sort of summarize what led to the discrepancy? Was it 450,000? Was that the number?
When you're preparing estimates for plans, renovation projects are always the most difficult. I may look at a wall and think that it's going to take me 10 hours to tear it down. Another person may look at it and say it's going to take 30 hours. So I think a lot of it has to do with just perception, and the construction schedule that we had projected for this last summer would have been quite aggressive, and I think that contributed to the cost as well. We've looked at modifying the approach to the construction schedule for next summer, where we would start the addition as soon as the frost is out of the ground, not do any renovation work till the summer. During the summer, we would concentrate on the renovation of the existing building, and then return to the addition construction area for finishing that in September, the first part of October. So again, trying to make it a little less aggressive and a little easier on the contractors. Also this year, by going out, we're hoping for January bidding, that will get the contractors lined up and committed to the project, rather than bidding it in June and not having contractors available for specific trades.
So slowing down the pace a little bit to make it hopefully save some costs by slowing the pace and catching the contractors when they might be a little more eager for work.
Correct.
Yeah, sounds good.
Commissioner Duax?
I just wonder, I can't find the exact phrase here in your memo, but Larry, but what is the difference that you're going to make in the way the construction from the outside of it to the finishes that you describe on the inside? There's 2 phases or 2 steps. Is that right?
We looked at a number of things. We looked at how we could simplify the construction, you know, whether it was post and beam, we're using columns and beams versus bearing walls. We looked at the outside of the building. There was a pitched roof. We're looking at not making that as accentuated, simplifying the construction. We're using precast concrete panels on the outside of the building. We're looking at going to brick because we think we'll be able to do that cheaper. We've looked at the placement of windows, possibly reducing the size to some extent, eliminating overhangs on portions of the building. So there's a great number of things that we've looked at.
And then you have to finish the inside, make it look good.
We'll still have good finishes, yes.
Good, good. Thank you.
Anyone else? Commissioner Luganville.
I know that in the initial planning of the original plan, the memorial, individuals from Memorial were very much involved and interested in what it came to be when it was first brought to us. With the changes, have the staff been pretty receptive that you've worked with on it, and have they helped you as you've gone through this revised
I guess
piece?
I can talk that to Trevor. We, with Trevor, Daryl Peterson, the building manager there, and our staff, we have looked at the plans and reduced the size of the addition, but we've maintained the functionality of that. I don't think we've made, from the public standpoint, any modifications that they would possibly even perceive at this point in time.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Do you have anything to add, Trevor?
No, I think it was just a couple of small things, but nothing compromise of the initial plan.
So we're feeling we're good to go. Yep, it'll be put on the consent agenda next time.
Budget adjustment for this last year's.
Will it be on a budget adjustment from last year?
I think it will come under a change to the original proposal that was made to you.
Okay, all right, so that's what it'll look like on the consent agenda. Okay, you have questions, make sure you ask. Do you have a question? Yep. Commissioner Hart.
So specifically, what change in the financials can we expect to see with that? Is it, was that the number you said before?
Yes, what I'm looking at and projecting right now, and the architects are projecting with the costs that we're at, is that the savings that we have from this current summer of 2017 are more than what the costs, additional costs are expected for Memorial.
These were the savings, I think you said, in the boiler and the other
Well,
things, or was it?
we had savings this year quite significant in the roofing and paving projects due to the price of oil. So we had, I believe, around $1 million in savings in just round numbers, and then we used about $500,000 of that to redo all the boilers, all the chillers at Memorial.
So when we talk about Memorial as a total cost for these sort of referendum changes, these are all referendum-driven changes, is that right?
They're all referendum-funded projects.
Funded changes. And when we look at that as a total lump for Memorial, if I'm hearing you right, we're not looking at a total increase. Is that right?
We don't need any additional funding from the referendum besides the referendum dollars that were initially slated.
Yeah. Great.
I think that's good to end this discussion in the sense that people realize that this is dedicated money from the referendum for what it's being used for.
Correct.
So it cannot be used for anything else. Just because we had talked about other budget items tonight, I wanted to make sure that that was distinguished between. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, We can do a request for future agenda items. Are there any? Seeing none, before we end tonight,
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and the Eau Claire Area School Board. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.